Welcome everyone. I'm Nicole Pollard. I'm residency coordinator at Leeway Foundation. I use she and they pronouns, and to provide a visual description for those that may need it, for those that are blind or low vision. I'm a Black biracial woman. I have my hair in a high bun, and I'm wearing a black long sleeve shirt. I'd like to also hand it over to Melissa Hamilton, my colleague, who I'm also joined by tonight.
Hey folks, I'm Melissa. Use she, her pronouns. I am a fat white woman. I have had a marathon day, but I'm happy to be here with you tonight. I have pompadour hair. I've got gold glasses on, a black V-neck, and a kind of taupey, mauvey blazer on. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight and excited to hear what you might be dreaming about. I'll be on the back end. Nicole, take real good care of you tonight.
Yes, but definitely inviting your voice in as much as you'd like, Melissa, throughout. I know it's always better to have two voices than one. Um, and I also am very excited that we're joined by 2024 Media Artist and Activist Residency awardees, the exceptional Laura Deutch and Ella-Gabriel Mason. Laura and Ella-Gabriel, I would love for you to introduce yourselves as well, maybe starting with Laura.
Hey everybody. My name's Laura Deutsch, she, her pronouns, visual description, white woman, black and gray, salt and pepper hair, short, some white dangly earrings. I'm still in my work office at PhillyCam with a pink wall behind me. And yeah, do you want a longer introduction or just pass it to Ellie Gabe and then come back? Did you want us to say anything
You
about
could
it?
add pronouns and maybe just your artistic practice as well.
Sure. Media artist, also kind of, I guess, social practice work. I do kind of just publicly engaged events and yeah, my pronouns are she, her. I'll
Awesome.
pass it to
Thank
Ellie
you.
Gabe.
Hi, I'm Ella Gabriel Mason, go by Ella Gabe for short. I use they, them, and I'm a white, gender fluid person with long brown hair and a gray sweatshirt on, a very nosy cat who might appear on the screen from time to time. Um, and yeah, most of my formal artistic training and background is in dance and choreography, but over the last decade, I've been doing more and more work with video and text and installation and different ways of relating to community within those forms.
Awesome. Thank you. Really, really happy that both of y'all were available to share a little bit about your experience as we move through some information about the opportunity. So thank you again for your time. And also because this is, a Zoom meeting, I want to make sure I also lift up for folks that you at any point in time during our conversation can add questions that you might have, comments in the chat. Melissa's probably going to be able to get to them more easily than I. But we'll make sure that we can, address them intermittently and they don't necessarily have to wait until the end. If you have questions that aren't answered in this session, of course, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to set up a time for either an application support meeting or something else to help answer your questions in more depth. I'm going to also drop the link for the Leeway Eventbrite page in the chat. So you can find all of those available days that we have for one-on-one meetings. So to just dive in and give you a general overview of who we are and what we do at Leeway. Leeway Foundation is a foundation that supports women, trans, and/or gender nonconforming artists and culture producers that are living in the Philadelphia area, but that's also the surrounding counties. And these are artists that are working at the intersection of art, culture, and social change. Leeway is definitely big on the fact that we are a trans-affirming organization, affirming organization. So we're committed to gender self-determination. And when we're using the word trans, we're really thinking about that in the most inclusive sense. So it's really thinking about using it as an umbrella term that allows anyone to basically self-describe themselves. So anyone whose gender identity, expression, etc., is nonconforming or is different than their gender assigned at birth. Through our grant making, we work in the service of social justice movements, really working hard to move money to those that are seeking to recognize women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists, We find that these folks, their work is often ignored, silenced, or marginalized just because of what they create or who they are. And this is, we're thinking about people of color, immigrants, queer, trans, and gender conforming folks, poor working class people, people who take risks with an art form and content to share their social change vision. When I'm describing, this Philadelphia area again, and I'm saying surrounding counties, anyone in these surrounding counties, such as Bucks County, Camden County, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, are eligible to apply. So if you have questions about eligibility, especially when we get to that part of the presentation, please feel free to ask. But usually our grants are for individual artists, but something about this opportunity that makes it even more exciting for me is this is one of our opportunities that actually invites an artist and an organization to apply together. So it's the first, but hopefully not the last opportunity that we offer in that regard. And one of the ways that really allows us to be so helpful to you all is that our staff are not responsible for making decisions, right? So we're always inviting in a panel that involves community-based artists, culture producers that are making decisions through a consensus-based process. So that really allows us to be able to give you feedback even on your application and answer any questions and really be, again, of support to you as you move through this application process. And that really ties into like this idea that we try to be different than most foundations. We try to be a little bit more gentler, a little bit kinder. We really make sure to offer as many of these info session and applicant support sessions as we can, so that we can really make sure, all of your questions get answered. Our applications, and this one in particular, is translated in both English and Spanish. And every single person who applies gets feedback or has the option to get feedback. And that's also really huge in our process. We want to make sure that this isn't just like a kind of smoke and mirrors situation, that you actually understand, why a decision was made and how you might be able to, receive some critical feedback to make improvements in the future. We understand that you're putting a lot of time and energy into this application. So we want to make sure, you get some of that feedback back. So moving on to this idea of social change. At Leeway, we're really looking at the intersections of art and social change. And I think oftentimes people have questions about what we actually mean by that. And so we're thinking about art for social change is art that has a vision or maybe even a intentional analysis attached to it. So it's vision that impacts not just a few individuals, but communities for change. So essentially, if your art has community impact that ripples beyond you and just a few folks, so it's not just you working away in your studio with just a couple collaborators, but it's being shared out more broadly. That's what we mean by impact or social change that happens from work. So as you think about this residency in particular, we really want to encourage you to think about how your art creates action. That is going to even be one of the questions that's included in the application is thinking about this idea of action. So sometimes when people think about impact, it's kind of just thinking about like what they want to happen as a result of the project, but it's kind of okay, the project has happened, but what now, right? And so it can be used as a tool to raise consciousness, a strategy for organizing or movement building. Maybe you're trying to challenge various oppressions like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. Maybe you're trying to reclaim certain cultural practices. So there's so many possibilities here. Our MAR guidelines are really, really helpful in breaking down this in more detail. And so in the guidelines on page 2, you'll be able to see that breakdown more clearly. And I'm going to drop that into the chat for you as well. Can also be found on the website, but it's helpful as we're talking through it. But I want to ask you, Ella-Gabe, before we talk about specifics of the residency in particular, is there anything that you think people should know about Leeway?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I want to do is just really encourage you to not hesitate to reach out and ask questions throughout the application process. And definitely sign up for the one-on-one application coaching sessions. That was really incredibly helpful in our process. And I think, I'll say for myself, applying for grants and programs is, I find incredibly stressful and it can just feel really opaque. And I've found that at Leeway, like there are real people that you can ask questions to, and they're not going to be the ones determining whether you get funding or not. And so it's just like a really, I don't know, they're really on your side. And I think that's something that can be, I found it can be easy to feel intimidated and not want to be as upfront about like, here's where I'm lost, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm feeling really confused. And just encourage you that the staff here really are a resource to help you. They want everyone to turn in the best application that they can. And so yeah, so don't hesitate, don't beat yourself up, don't feel like you have to have it more together before showing up to something. Because maybe through the conversation you have with Nicole or Melissa, you will figure out, oh, here's the core of my idea, or here's the words I need to communicate that in a way that most makes sense for how this residency is framed.
Mhm. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's one thing for me to be like, this is my favorite part of the job. Let me talk to you. But it's really great to hear about your experience. And I'm so glad we could be helpful in your process. Um, and so, yeah, let's talk more about the residency in particular. This is, as I mentioned, our first opportunity that invites an artist and a social justice org to apply together. It provides grants of 25,000 to women, trans, and gender conforming media artists, working in close collaboration with a social justice organization to document, reframe, and/or amplify the issues and campaigns addressed by the organization. And so we're really like what we see as the power of this opportunity is that it's all about showcasing the ways that artists and artistic processes in particular can really be almost strategic in their work to help amplify, the messaging of social justice-based organizations to, do more of what we hope Leeway Grants would do, achieve social change. And so again, this is an opportunity where you apply together. So an artist fills out an application, social justice org fills out their application to complete, the full, I guess the complete application, to say that word one more time. And typically there are about five-ish residencies that are awarded. And that money is divided in that 15,000 of unrestricted funds goes to the artist and 10,000 goes to the organization. This year, the deadline's coming a bit earlier, and the deadline is April 14th by 11:50 p.m. So that means that there's still, a little over a month to dream about possibilities, to talk with possible collaborators if you don't have one already. So this is, an opportunity, as Ella-Gabe was kind of lifting up, if you don't have all of those questions answered, to lift them up. We can help you in that thought partnership. But it also means that you have some time to be inspired by wonderful artists like Laura and Ella-Gabe. Laura, I want to ask you if you could talk a little bit about what you all received the residency for and the media practice that's at the core of it.
Sure. So Ella-Gabe and I applied together, which I think was exciting for us. I'll just say we don't have like a history of collaborating. And so I think through this grant, we came together and we met because of the work we were doing with Jewish Voice for Peace. So JVP Philly is our change partner or our supporting organization. And we had been working together and it's an all volunteer chapter. And so prior, kind of post October 7th, we were part of a documentation team that was forming and emerging and responding in really, quick and urgent ways to protests and actions and things that were happening, calling for ceasefire and speaking out against the genocide in Gaza. And we were making really short videos for social media, like 60-second videos. And I think there were a lot of people on the documentation team, and we have kind of filmmaking and media backgrounds. And so I think what this grant allowed us to do is think about what would it look like to have time to create like longer work. And so the main pieces that we applied to create, there were sort of kind of two separate types of pieces. And one was more of a political education piece that could support the Israel Bonds campaign that JVP is working on. So like, what is Israel Bonds? Most people don't know, right? You're asking people to sign a petition. You want people to get on board with this thing. You can't really explain it in 60 seconds or a few slides. So we wanted to create longer work with interviewing different people. And then we also wanted to create short form, like more personal portraits with individuals, thinking about, again, the way that activist people are part of JVP, or people that were sort of being shown in the media or being part of encampments are like seen in this kind of angry protester space, and wanting to think about how to have a more intimate way to do that narrative shifting work of like what it means to be a Jewish person who is not identifying with Zionism or is actively rejecting it, or just trying to kind of make sense of their identity, at this moment, and not have this conflated with Israeli policy and US policy. So those are kind of our two projects that we're working on together this year. So
thank you. And we did include one of your short videos that you actually used as a work sample here. So we can take a moment to play that now.
Zionism is not Judaism. Jews existed long before the state of Israel did, and being loyal to Israel, even in the face of that country's militaristic murder and destruction, compromises our Jewish values of healing the world and the sanctity of all life. The idealistic project we supported has brought real violence and destruction of Palestinian land, culture, and life. The safety that we thought we were buying instead bought danger and death of Palestinian people. And the safe existence we thought we were buying for ourselves, for Jews, is not safe at all. The state of Israel does not keep Jewish people or any people safe.
Israel bonds, you can't hide. You are funding genocide. Israel bonds, you can't hide. You are funding genocide. No more money for Israel's crime.
All right. Like, not only was that great for social media, but also great to share a bit of your work in this presentation. So thanks for letting us. And jumping back into aspects of the application, social change intents or visions is something that Leeway uses to kind of help define these social change categories to, kind of place, I guess, the movement that you're working within. And so we asked you to identify at least one, but no more than three of these social change intents. So again, so we can better understand the social issue that your work is trying to address or create change or action around. This list on the slide, gives you an idea of what those categories are. And we purposely don't give definitions for them, right? We're actually hoping that there can be space within the application, specifically in question 3, where you can actually self-define what those mean to you, such as, what racial justice specifically means to you and your work. You'll basically be asked to think about how your art will create action or, change around those social change intents that you select. So we definitely encourage you to be thoughtful about what you choose here. I think sometimes people feel the pressure to choose more than one, but then if they're not actually able to speak to how that's represented in their residency or in even like the work of the organization they're collaborating with, it doesn't actually allow the application to be quite as strong. So Laura, I'd like to ask you what your social change intents were. And how did you talk about how your project engaged with those particular intents and issues or issue areas in your application?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's like great about the partnership is you can really like lean into the goals of the organization. And so it wasn't so much us coming up with these ideas as well as thinking about like, what is JVP doing and how is the work kind of supporting that? And so one of their mandates is ending U.S. military funding to Israel. And so thinking about demilitarization as one element, and I think thinking about what it means to be like a taxpayer, not just in this country, but specifically in Pennsylvania, and how is money getting funneled to the Israeli government in the form of Israel bonds, and educating people around that. And then the cultural preservation work, I think, is kind of where we aligned more of this narrative work, shifting work. I think something that JVP says and that they do is thinking about providing like a counterweight to just to these kind of Jewish mainstream organizations that seem to dominate, to conflate Jewishness with Zionism and with Israel. And I think being able to have people think about like the expansiveness of their own, spiritual life, their family history, their religious or cultural practices, beyond, this kind of like beyond this state, was really important. And so, yeah, that's the work we're doing through the shorter videos.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I appreciate you walking us through that logic of how you self-defined those categories. But also, I agree, you made a great point in that, you can really think about aligning yourself with the mission of the org you're applying with as you're choosing these categories. So moving on to collaboration, which is the biggest part of this opportunity. We really stress that collaboration should be an active and mutually beneficial partnership between the artist and the organization. That, this is not just the artist kind of being hired to do work for the organization, but they're actually again, working together to create this shared vision with a clearly agreed upon mission, objectives, and strategies, that there's, an understanding and respect for each other and their respective work. Similarly, like this shouldn't just be the artist working to fulfill the needs of the organization, or the artist just kind of off doing their own work and kind of using it as a production grant, but that both parties, have a stake in both the process as well as the outcome of the project. I think that communication is probably big in any relationship, but also specifically a collaboration. And so I would say these residencies definitely require artists and organizations to communicate frequently and clearly about expectations, needs, and updates as the project evolves. And we have more about collaboration and kind of how we view it essentially in page 6 of the guidelines. So we really encourage you to kind of take a look at that before applying. But with that in mind, collaborations, they need to be sincere. And so just thinking about that balance that gets created. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two applications, one that the artist completes and one that the org completes. I'll drop both of those into the chat so you have them. And again, by submitting both of those, that makes your application for the residency complete. And Ella-Gabe, I'm hoping you can share some details with us about your collaboration with JVP. What was your connection to JVP before you applied?
Yeah, so I have a really long history with JVP. I joined the organization 2012 and co-founded a chapter in Pittsburgh in 2014, which was where I was living before Philly. And so I was part of leadership in that chapter 2014 to 2019. Eventually made my way post-pandemic to Philly and was invited to join the steering committee of JVP Philly in like 2022. And we were a pretty small chapter at that time, post-pandemic, or post-shutdown anyway. And so we were mostly engaging in some like relatively small educational actions focused on billionaire Jeffrey Yass's funding of radical Israeli settlers and also school privatization locally, doing some coalition work. So yeah, continue to serve now on the steering committee of JBP Philly, but my work has fallen as we've grown in response to the genocide, and have many, many more people who want to take action with us in the most coordinated and powerful ways we can. Um, my sort of volunteer scope has moved more towards documentation and trying to build out like a communications team. Um, and so, yeah, so this collaboration feels very like, um, has felt relatively easeful in that like I'm very embedded in like the leadership of the chapter as well as within this project. And so I feel like within my collaboration with Laura, I'm kind of serving as having some more institutional understanding of like JVP as an org over time. Um, though we also are like regularly chatting with like other leadership in the chapter or even folks in the national organization to get ideas and feedback. And so that is definitely like a continual part of what we've been up to since we were awarded. And I think will keep being the case as we start to have like actual rough draft edits and like things to share and get eyes on.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you. And while y'all are, a great example of folks who had a pre-existing relationship with the organization before, I just want to lift up that that's by no means required. The relationship could be new, and you could have just kind of connected and decided to apply as a result of, this finding out about this opportunity. And so I just want to make sure I make that clear that that doesn't rule you out. And so moving on to artist eligibility, I'm going to tell you a bit about, eligibility for artists and move through the artist application, and then we'll talk about organizations. So you're eligible to apply if you're a media artist, and media arts is truly at the core of your application. We do think about media arts in a more expansive sense, and we have a list of the various forms of media that you might consider applying with. I can even drop that into the chat, but you'll find that online as well. These bullets look very dark. Please excuse how dark those look. If you live, as I mentioned, in the Bucks, Camden, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, or Philadelphia counties, you're at least 18 years old. You identify as a woman, trans, or gender nonconforming person. And of course, you're working collaboratively with a social justice organization. You may not apply if you don't have a collaborating organization. Again, this is a collaborative opportunity. If you're on the staff or board of the collaborating org. And so interesting question in that, some organizations or even, if they're more like collectives that are fiscally sponsored, you might be affiliated with that organization. But what we mean by that is that you are not on the payroll, that you're not being paid, or have some kind of conflict of interest that goes beyond just an affiliation with the org. And I know that there's some nuance there, and we can always talk about that more if you have any questions. If you're not eligible, if you're a full-time student in an arts degree program, if you've received a 2024 Transformation Award, or if you plan to apply for the Transformation Award this year, they're just two of our larger awards. And so you might just strategize about which one you want to apply for this year and which one you want to apply for next year if you're interested in both. And if you haven't turned in all of your reports for any previous Leeway grants or residencies, if you've received one. And so let's move into more specifics about the artist application. So basically, what the application includes is just asking for basic information from you. We'll ask you to fill out an experience page. And this is something that is really unique to Leeway in that we don't ask for you to submit artist resume, but we instead give you this space to share 4 to 10 personal or professional or even political experiences that led you to your work as an artist today. So don't just, think about this as just like basically copying and pasting or recreating your artist resume or CV here. You can even balance it, with some personal experiences. So if there was like that pivotal moment, you remember like, working on the floor of your parents' studio as a child, and then that in that moment you knew that you wanted, I don't know, giving an example, but it doesn't have to be, just kind of framed only in the professional. Or really just we're we're really just trying to understand how these moments or points over the course of your life have shaped you into the artist that you are today and the experiences that have led you to this work. And so I'd like to actually ask you, excuse me, Ella-Gabe, what was the process of creating your experience page, and how did you decide to include, or what did you decide to include on your timeline?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say this part made me really nervous because I was like, oh, I don't only or predominantly think of myself as a media artist. And wow, I've spent a lot of time trying to get like the nice resume. And so I'm like, oh, I can't use it. Oh, shoot. Like, what do I do? But what helped guide me is I first was identifying like, okay, what are the skills and knowledge that are most applicable to exactly what I want to do in this residency. Because, right, I think the point of the experience page is to really demonstrate like that you have the things that you need to achieve the goal of what you're applying to do. So for me, that came down to like, do I have experience with some film work since we're talking about making films? Knowledge of and experience with like the topic of different campaigns for Palestinian liberation, working within Jewish communities on that, and then also just experience working with communities on storytelling in political projects. And so that really helped me narrow down what to focus on. So, I included experiences that were just about media creation and not related to the other things. So that included for me, like making a dance film about like protein processes for like a science thing. And also that I took a videography course as an elective at Temple's film program when I was doing my MFA. And then it also included some different elements of my work with Jewish Voice for Peace as a volunteer. And then it also included an experience working with sex workers in Pittsburgh on a storytelling and campaign creation. And then at the end of that sort of like, here's all the things, it asks you to highlight one particular experience. And so I chose one that I felt like brought together all of the three areas that I was trying to highlight. So I talked about working on documentation and storytelling. So doing some of the filmmaking, doing that storytelling, but specifically with an organization that brings Jewish activists to engage in direct action led by Palestinian communities. So like really bringing in the issue area and all of those things together. What I'll say, like what was hard and I did not do is I was like, well, there's lots of things that I think make me like impressive, but are like just really unrelated to this project, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like none of those made it there. And I think that was like the correct move, but that was like tricky. And I got other people to read through and be like, this seems like cool, you did this, but is off topic. Like this isn't really related. And so that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for lifting that up. I think that's a great recommendation and makes total sense that, how might you and kind of gleaning, your experience down to really telling more of a story that maybe it feels more in line with the work that you hope to do with this residency. Thanks also for lifting up the highlighted experience. That is a part of the experience page, and that you list, these few experiences, not in so much detail, but then you get the opportunity to give a little bit more or a longer description about one in particular. And so really thinking about how that one experience might be either that pivotal moment or a moment where you were really kind of perhaps working in more direction towards the work that you hope to do again with this residency. So thank you for that. And then there's these 6 questions about the residency that are included in an application. We're asking you to summarize the residency, explaining what media you plan to create and how that media will be used to document, reframe, or amplify the issues of your collaborating organization. We want to know why the residency is important to you. We want to know the goals and the intended impact of the residency. So again, coming back to the idea of like how the art creates action and actually being able to speak to like the what now is happening as a result of you making the thing. What do you hope people will do? What do you hope will come of it? How your collaboration with the org is sincere and mutually beneficial. Again, whether that's a established relationship or a new relationship, being able to speak to how you plan to work together. the communities that you'll work with as a part of this residency, and how your identities may play a role in that work. And so that question's sometimes one that people sometimes get stuck on, and that we're asking you to identify the communities that you're working with, but then also your own identity. And so there may be overlap there may not be. And then finally, how the media created as a part of the residency will engage communities and be shared and distributed. So how is this reaching beyond, once again, you and the few folks that you're working with? How are you creating a strategy around sharing the work more broadly? And so let's see. I'd like to ask you, Laura, in terms of answering those 6 questions, do you have any pointers or advice? Any feelings on what was the hardest one or the easiest one?
Yeah, I think I think the impact is always hard, right? It's kind of like, what is your theory of change with how your work is going to live in the world and the impact you think that it will have. And I think, again, for us, it's helpful to lean on a bigger organization. It wasn't just kind of on us to make this work and then go find ways to distribute it and create audiences and create all of the other support material. So I think like leaning into the work that JVP is already doing and wants to do helped us think also about the kind of work that we're making and making sure that that feels kind of aligned and will have like a pathway locally, but also, nationally. I always think like the distribution and audience, you don't ask a specific audience question, but I always do think audience is important. And, I think people tend to sort of want to say it's for everybody. And that's always, I think the advice someone said to me, and I think that's really important, is like, think really specifically about a person that you want that is watching or engaging with your piece, kind of like their identity, where they are, maybe what their views are, so that you're not just making something for everybody, but you can kind of really think about how someone might be coming to this work, and then how the work you're sharing is kind of addressing some of those biases people might have, or so yeah, I think that thinking about audience and for me, like with this project, it was really like, I want to create work that I can share with my family, and I don't talk about these issues with my family, and I want to have something where I can be like, hey guys, look, here's a video I worked on. Maybe we can talk about this next time we meet, and it'll be less awkward, right? That was kind of something personal for me, but thinking about, yeah, how this kind of work like might live, and also I think how we're creating work that's not just kind of like for Jewish communities as well, right? That these aren't just issues, specifically the Israel bonds piece, that the JVP is part of a coalition, and we didn't want to just kind of create more propaganda for JVP, but we wanted to create something that had different types of perspectives in terms of the folks that we might interview for the work, and that it can be, have a little bit more of like a journalistic angle to it. Still have an advocacy point of view, but again, not just feel like we're making work that's coming out of the communication arm of JVP, if that makes sense. So I think that was an important conversation we had internally.
Totally. Yeah. And thank you. I really appreciate that advice or that suggestion as to how folks might approach audience. That is a tricky question. Whether that is, that one in terms of how you're engaging communities or distributing the work, or even defining the identities of that community. And I know that you talked, a little bit already about the work sample that we shared, and kind of how those shorter videos were kind of the way that you were distributing work first before deciding that you wanted to make more or longer content. But I'm curious how you decided to choose your 2 work samples, because as a part of this application, we only give space to upload 2 work samples, which it can be video, it can be image, audio, or even text-based. So yeah, I'm curious what led you to choosing those 2.
Yeah, I think the video that you showed was a piece like that showcased the collaboration that Ella-Gabe and I had, and the work that we've done with JVP more recently, and that's kind of a thread of what we're going to continue to pull out. So I think that kind of made sense. And then the second piece was a piece that I had worked on in collaboration with the No Arena Chinatown Coalition, and it was very different. It was like a music video, kind of mock music video, and I think the thinking behind that was more to showcase, ability to work with a broad group of people, maybe like take an approach to something that isn't so like on the nose or didactic per se, um, that could show. Yeah, I think again, like you're applying to make new work, so you're not necessarily going to have work that looks like the work you want to create, but you want to show some of the ways you might think or might approach other projects that can then kind of map onto this, if that makes sense. So I think, um, yeah, the sort of the being able to engage lots of people, the think creatively about kind of the issue you're communicating. And then having two work samples, it's nice. You can show something that feels, one thing might feel more in line and something else might feel like more of a curveball, but might give more of an insight to your personality or work or experience, in other areas. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing a little bit of that that process or strategy. And well, let's move on to collaborating organization eligibility, and then similarly the application. So organizations are eligible to apply if they're a social justice organization with a 501(c)(3) status or a fiscal sponsor. So as I was lifting up before, this could be an organization that is incorporated themselves or fiscally sponsored. So this could include, orgs with much smaller budgets, much smaller amounts of people within them. It might even look like a smaller collective or organization of people that again has a fiscal sponsor, and there'll be a way to provide that information in the application. Similarly located in the regions that we fund, and with an operating budget that's less than 1.5 million. Collaborating, of course, with a media artist. Orgs are ineligible to apply if they don't have a media artist that they're collaborating with, or if they're collaborating with a media artist that's on the staff or board of the organization, as we lifted up before in the artist eligibility section, or if their budget is, of course, larger than 1.5. So in looking at the questions that are a part of the collaborating organization form, similarly, we're going to ask for some basic information. Again, this would be where you might include some of that info around fiscal sponsorship, contact information for who the rep or the point of contact is at the organization. And there's 5 questions about the organization's role in the residency. Melissa, are you able to hit to the next slide? So these questions are wanting to know more about your organization, who your organization is, its mission and the communities that it serves, your relationship with the media artists and why you might think that they're well suited for the collaboration, how your org will benefit from this artist as a part of your team, and really important, how you think your org has the capacity to steward this collaboration. Again, there's no restrictions on how big or small your org is, but making sure that this, the people, should there only be a few of them, have the time and the resources beyond what the grant can provide to really pour into this collaboration. How this collaboration with the media artist is sincere and mutually beneficial. Similar question to the artist app. And also what you hope to get out of the residency and the impact that might result or come from it. So worded a little bit differently, but similarly getting around this idea of action. When we use that word impact, what's going to happen as a result of the work. And so we do ask for documentation, just that verifies, again, that you are either a 501(c)(3) org or your fiscally sponsored project. I'm curious, Laura, since this residency is collaborative, how did you work on this application with Ezra at JVP? Did you meet and discuss the work before submitting your respective parts of the application, or did you even read or review each other's applications before submitting? What did that process look like?
Yeah, we had a shared Google Doc and went back and forth a lot. I mean, I think Ella Gabe and I would do a pass, then we would share it with Ezra, even share it with some, other folks that were part of the documentation team. You start with, 5,000 words, it goes down to 3,000, and you kind of keep dwindling. So I think it's good to like get it all out there, run it by people. Yeah, and obviously you kind of have to be on the same page, but yeah, it was very collaborative.
Mhm. Yeah, and you bring up something so important, a Google Doc, whether or not that's where you choose to do your work. We definitely don't recommend that you're only recording your answers in the application. So depending on how your process is, make sure you're recording those answers elsewhere so you not only have a copy of them, but also should anything happen to the form, your answers are somewhere else. Um, and so I'm curious to hear from you, Ella Gabe, if you want to share, anything about how this residency has impacted your work or your life. I know that you all are kind of, just in the middle or in the trenches of it all, but anything you want to uplift there?
Yeah, I mean, this residency has given me the financial resources and also just like the permission to make more space to focus on media as part of my artistic practice. Um, yeah, as we've said, it just feels really exciting to get to work on longer form work rather than just these sort of short little social media recaps of, actions and events. And yeah, I think, it's setting us up to do this more ambitious work and to do that with equipment and with deadlines, which is something I really need to be accountable and with a collaborator. Like this is my first time working more deeply with Laura and I'm learning a ton from her. Um, and, we're also now part of this cohort of media artists who all have residencies this year and who meet with staff. And like that becomes a resource also for troubleshooting and peer support and learning. And so that has been amazing.
Thank you. And to both of you, is there anything else that you're hoping to share with people today as they possibly, hopefully, put together their media artists and activist applications?
I guess when I think it's really important to just it shouldn't feel forced, right? I feel like projects have their moment and funding has its moment. And I know it can be hard because grants are always like competitive. But yeah, just kind of make sure it feels like the right thing. And when you're writing, it should feel sort of natural. And by natural, I don't mean like forcing it into grant speak or feeling like you're having to like change your words to fit the questions. Like it should really feel like it fits. And I think the process should help you develop your idea. And if the questions that are being asked and you're responding to, you're getting thrown, maybe that's like a clue, like it should help you refine the project. Yeah, so that's all. Don't force it. It should feel like there's a moment. Everything has its moment. So
Thank you.
And I'll just add to that some advice I got from a friend a long time ago about applying for grants that I felt was really true for this one and true in general is that, you should be able to talk about your project the way you'd explain it to your grandma. Like, so just, yeah, finding the simplest language to share what you're doing, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, really, really grateful for your time. I'm curious if any folks in the Zoom room have any questions for Laura or Ella Gabe or myself or Melissa. Please feel free to unmute yourself or throw that question into the chat. I also recently, or again, dropped the link for Leeway's Eventbrite in the chat, so you can sign up for an applicant support session if you're interested, where we can get that one-on-one time. Any questions? We are like right perfectly on time. I'm also going to drop my personal email in the chat. You're welcome to also reach out to me directly. But really grateful again, Laura, Ella-Gabe, for your time. Um, Folks, I'm grateful in the, I guess, attendees. I'm grateful for attending. Um, and okay, question. Can folks who apply for MAR in 2025 apply for LTA 2026? Yes, but should you not receive MAR this year? So basically, if you were currently in the residency, then you wouldn't be able to apply for LTA the next year. But if you're, it all kind of depends on the strategy, right? Like I think if you want to give this one a try this year, and obviously hope that you get it, great. But if you don't, then you would be able to apply for either MAR again or LTA next year. Yes, of course.
Hey, I'm just saying nothing beats a try in one of those
It
years,
doesn't.
you know.
Guessing the inverse is true. Yes, correct. So if you get an LTA, you would be ineligible for applying for MAR next year. Yeah. The next question, is it okay for the collaborative project to advance the interests of the organization in ways that open art education opportunities for the broader community? Yes, I mean, I think there's been a few residencies that have series of workshops involved, and some of those are more art educational. So it's not so much that that can't be an aspect of it, but we want to make sure that there's also media that's at the core of the project that is still like the main part of the residency, I should say, not project, that's being created, and that those art education workshops or opportunities, or even if you're using that as an opportunity to interface with members of that community, or just informing that work.
Yeah, a great example of this is one of the folks who you saw on the slide earlier, Nuala Shetty, working with Norris Square Neighborhood Project. And Nuala was doing like virtual reality, AR, VR work. But as part of that, Nuala was also working with members of the community to train them on how to create that media themselves. We also have an artist named Kristen Harrison working with a social justice group called Philly Thrive, who's really thinking about healthcare as human rights and environmental justice work. And she's training a cohort of folks in audio and media documentation as part of it. So yeah, it can certainly be broader community education opportunity.
Mm-hmm. What's the time range for when the collaboration needs to take place within, i.e. within a year from when the grant is distributed? Great question. Grants, and this is going to be tricky because the timeline's changed in my mind.
10 to 12 weeks after the deadline.
Yes, 10 to 12 weeks after the deadline is when notification letters go out. And then you would be given your grant agreement, as well as a big part that actually kind of echoes all of this importance that we put around collaboration is we'll ask you all to create a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, that helps you to really spell out all of your all of the details of your collaboration and the agreements that you're making as a result of that. And so basically, however much time it takes you to create that, then we're able to distribute your grant funds. So it could be as soon as like a week later or a couple weeks later, sometimes a month later. That would essentially be when your grant period would start. And so thinking about the deadline being in April, mid-April, let's say 3 months from that, July, midsummer-ish, mid to late summer-ish, your project might be getting started. And your final report, should you be awarded this year, wouldn't be due until, are we still going with March, Melissa?
Well, usually it's between 12 and 18 months, right? And so if you think about Laura and Ella-Gabriel, their report, they got the grant in the fall of 24. Their final report is due in March 2026. And so it roughs out to about 18 months almost, right? And so I imagine if we're granted in June, you wouldn't have a final report that's due until at least the end of 2026.
Right. Thank you. Yes. and please forgive me, our timeline, because it changed. I'm like, what are all the new dates?
We got you. It's a year and some change. Think about it.
Yeah. Yes. Year and some change. Any other questions? All right, all right. I think maybe just for the sake of time and letting folks be free on this Thursday evening, I'm going to wrap things up now. But again, if you weren't here for the full session, we have recorded this, so this will be available on our website soon. And again, please, we encourage you to sign up for an application support meeting or an applicant support meeting, excuse me. We call it both things. On one of these following dates, a couple online, also one in person at Scribe. We'd love to sit down with you, hear what you're thinking, even review some application questions that you may have drafted. So looking forward to talking to you soon. Thank you so much again for your time. Laura, Ella, Gabe, y'all are amazing. Thanks for answering all those questions. I hope you have a great night.
Thanks, folks. Really appreciate you. Hope to see you soon.
All right, good luck, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Good luck.
Come get your money, folks. Come get it.